You're at brunch with friends who all ordered the $18 avocado toast and $7 lattes, and you're sitting there with the cheapest thing on the menu, wondering if you're being smart or just missing out on your 20s. Everyone around you seems to be living their best life: new apartments, weekend trips, clothes that look expensive because they are. And you're trying to save $200 a month, which feels both responsible and completely pointless when rent costs what it does. My name is Anderson, and I've spent years studying the invisible fork in the road that happens in your 20s, the point where some people set themselves up for decades of options and others lock themselves into decades of obligation. And here's what I've learned: the difference isn't income, it's not luck, it's not even discipline in the traditional sense. It's about understanding that certain purchases in your 20s are actually investments disguised as expenses. They feel like you're spending money, but you're really buying leverage, time, knowledge, freedom, options. Most people get this exactly backwards. They think their 20s are for living and their 30s are for building, but that's like saying you'll train for a marathon starting at mile 20, the foundation gets built early, or it doesn't get built at all. The compound effect isn't just about money. It's about every decision you make. The skills you develop compound. The habits you form compound. The networks you build compound. And yes, the money you invest compounds exponentially. But only if you start now. Only if you make specific, strategic purchases that look boring to everyone else but create momentum that carries you for decades. Today, I'm going to walk you through 7 purchases that separate people who build wealth from people who just survive. Not 7 things that make you look successful. 7 things that actually make you successful quietly over time. Purchase 1, your first investment account. Let's start with the most uncomfortable one. Opening and funding an investment account in your 20s feels impossible. You're making $45,000 or $55,000 or maybe $70,000 if you're lucky. After rent, student loans, and basic survival, there's barely anything left. But here's the math that changes everything. If you invest $300 a month starting at age 24, and that money grows at 9% annually, roughly the historical stock market average, you'll have about $1.16 million by age 65. If you wait until age 34 to start that same $300 monthly investment, you'll have about $490,000 at 65. That 10-year delay costs you $670,000. Not because you invested less, you'd actually invest about the same total amount, but because you lost a decade of compounding. This is why your 20s matter so disproportionately. Every dollar you invest at 25 has 40 years to multiply. Every dollar you invest at 35 has 30 years. The difference is geometric, not linear. The purchase isn't the stocks or funds themselves. It's the discipline of opening the account, automating the contribution, and letting it run in the background while you focus on everything else. Most people never do this because $300 a month feels significant when you're barely covering expenses, but $300 a month is $10 a day. That's less than people spend on lunch without thinking about it. The key is treating the investment like a bill that gets paid first, not savings that happens if there's money left over. Because there's never money left over, there's only money you decide to allocate before you see it. Purchase 2, skills that scale. The second purchase is harder to quantify but possibly more valuable. Investing in skills that compound over decades. Not college degrees, those might be necessary, but they're table stakes, not leverage. I'm talking about the specific, practical skills that increase your earning power regardless of where you work or who employs you. These might be technical: coding, data analysis, design, video production. They might be interpersonal: negotiation, sales, public speaking, writing. They might be entrepreneurial: understanding marketing, building systems, managing projects. The purchase is the course, the book, the boot camp, the certification, whatever gets you from vaguely interested to competent enough to get paid for it. Here's why this matters more in your 20s than any other decade. Your brain is still highly adaptable, and you don't have the time constraints that come later. You can spend evenings and weekends learning things that will 10x your income over the next 20 years. And unlike a college degree that costs $100,000, most skill development costs $500 to $5,000 total. A $2,000 investment in learning how to build websites or analyze data or negotiate contracts could increase your lifetime earnings by $500,000. But most people skip this because they're tired after work. They want to relax. They don't want to spend their 20s grinding on skills that won't pay off immediately. The people who do it anyway, who invest 5 to 10 hours a week building capabilities that didn't exist in them before, those are the people who have options at 35 that everyone else doesn't. Purchase 3, a reliable vehicle you own outright. Here's where I'm going to lose some of you. Buy a used, reliable car with cash and drive it until it physically cannot move anymore. I'm not talking about a $30,000 car with a payment. I'm talking about a $8,000 to $12,000 Honda or Toyota that's 5 to 7 years old, has under 80,000 miles, and will run for another decade with basic maintenance. This sounds unglamorous? It is. That's the point. The average new car payment in America is over $700 a month. Let's say you avoid that by buying used with cash. If you invest that $700 monthly instead at 8% returns over 20 years, you'd accumulate over $410,000. $410,000, the cost of looking successful in your 20s and 30s. But it's not just about the investment returns. It's about the psychological freedom. When you don't have a car payment, you can take career risks. You can quit toxic jobs. You can negotiate harder because you're not desperate. You can invest in opportunities when they appear because your cash flow isn't locked into servicing debt. A car payment keeps you employed by necessity. A paid-off car keeps you employed by choice. That difference changes everything about how you navigate your career. Purchase 4. Experiences that build network. The fourth purchase is the one that sounds indulgent but is actually strategic. Travel and experiences that expose you to different people, perspectives, and possibilities. Not Instagram-worthy vacations, not luxury resorts. I'm talking about going places that expand your understanding of how the world works and introduce you to people operating at different levels. This might mean a week-long conference in an industry you're interested in. It might mean a volunteer program in another country. It might mean a road trip to visit friends who are building interesting things in different cities. The purchase isn't the experience itself, it's the perspective shift and the relationships that follow. Your network in your 20s determines your opportunities in your 30s. The people you meet casually at 25 might offer you a job at 33. The person you sit next to on a plane might introduce you to the concept that becomes your business. But this only works if you're strategic. You're not traveling to escape, you're traveling to expose yourself to randomness in a controlled way. You're increasing your surface area for luck. The key is doing this on a budget. Use credit card points, stay with friends or in hostels, eat street food. The goal isn't comfort, it's exposure. And exposure to interesting people and ideas in your 20s can create value that lasts your entire career. Purchase 5, your health infrastructure. Here's the purchase that seems unrelated to wealth until you're 40 and realize you've been building on a deteriorating foundation. Invest in your health while it's still easy to maintain. This isn't about vanity, it's about performance. Your ability to work hard, think clearly, handle stress, and pursue opportunities depends entirely on your physical and mental state. The purchase looks like a gym membership you actually use, whole foods instead of processed garbage, sleep instead of endless scrolling, therapy if you need it, routine checkups that catch problems early. These purchases feel expensive in your 20s because the benefits are invisible. You're not sick yet, you still have energy, your metabolism still functions, so why pay now for something that seems fine? Because the cost of fixing health problems at 40 is exponentially higher than the cost of preventing them at 25. both financially and physically. If you establish habits in your 20s, exercise 3 times a week, sleep 7+ hours, eat mostly real food, those habits become automatic. They're not willpower intensive anymore. They're just what you do. But if you skip it and try to build those habits at 40, when your metabolism has slowed, your schedule is more constrained, and your body has accumulated damage, it's brutally hard. The people who build wealth in their 20s and 30s but destroy their health in the process often end up spending their 40s and 50s earning less and paying more for medical care. The wealth doesn't compound if the person can't show up consistently. Purchase 6, a side income stream. The sixth purchase is really a category of purchases, whatever it costs to start generating income outside your primary job. This might be equipment for freelancing, it might be inventory for a small e-commerce operation, it might be software subscriptions for a service business, it might be domain and hosting for a content platform. The specific business doesn't matter as much as the principle. In your 20s, you should be building at least one additional income stream that exists independently of your job. Not because you're going to quit your job, though, you might, but because the existence of alternative income changes your relationship with your career. You're no longer purely dependent on one employer. You have options. And more importantly, you're developing the skills and mindset that make you capable of generating value directly rather than only through employment. This is terrifying for most people because it requires risking money on something that might not work. A $1,500 investment in equipment or software inventory could completely fail. But here's the thing, even if the specific business fails, the experience of building it teaches you how value creation actually works. You learn marketing, sales, operations, customer service. You learn how to iterate on ideas. You learn resilience. Those lessons are worth far more than $1,500, and they'll serve you for decades, even if the first 3 businesses you try don't succeed. The people who skip this, who spend their 20s exclusively focused on climbing a corporate ladder, often hit their mid-30s and realize they're entirely dependent on one income source, with no idea how to create value independently. Purchase 7. Real estate, if you can make it work. The final purchase is the most controversial and situation dependent. Buying property in your 20s if and only if the numbers make sense. I'm not saying you should stretch to buy a house you can't afford. I'm saying that if you can find a way to make the math work, real estate can be one of the most powerful wealth building tools available. This might look like house hacking, buying a duplex, living in one unit, renting the other to cover most of your mortgage. It might look like buying a single family home with extra rooms and renting them to roommates. It might look like buying in a less desirable area that you're willing to live in for 5 years while the property appreciates. The reason this works in your 20s is that you have flexibility most people lose later. You can tolerate roommates, you can live in a less than ideal neighborhood, you can handle the hands-on work of being a landlord, and if you buy property at 26 and hold it until 46, you benefit from 20 years of appreciation, rent payments that covered your mortgage, and significant equity you can leverage for additional investments. But, and this is critical, this only works if the numbers actually make sense. If you're stretching to afford it, if the location is terrible, if the cash flow is negative, then you're not investing. You're just taking on debt that constrains your options. The purchase decision requires running actual calculations. What's the monthly payment versus market rent? What are the maintenance costs? What's the realistic appreciation rate? Can you afford it if you don't find renters immediately? If the numbers work, this purchase can accelerate wealth building by a decade. If they don't, it can trap you in a financial prison for years. Here's what connects all 7 of these purchases. They're all about building a specific kind of identity. Not the identity you project to others, the identity you actually embody when nobody's watching. You're becoming someone who invests before spending, someone who develops valuable skills proactively, someone who avoids debt that doesn't build assets, someone who expands their network intentionally. Someone who maintains their physical infrastructure, someone who creates value independently, someone who thinks strategically about large purchases. That's not a small thing. That's a complete rewiring of how you approach money, time, and opportunity. And once that identity is established, once these behaviors become automatic rather than effortful, everything gets easier. You're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not relying on willpower. You're just operating according to a system you built in your 20s. The people who struggle financially into their 40s often aren't lacking discipline. They're lacking the foundational system that makes discipline unnecessary. Here's what I need you to understand. Making these purchases requires being comfortable being different from your peer group. While your friends finance new cars, you're driving a paid-off Civic. While they're taking lavish vacations, you're investing in skills. While they're spending everything they earn, you're automatically investing before you see the money. And for a few years, it's going to feel like you're missing out. Like everyone else figured out how to enjoy their 20s while you're grinding. But what you're actually missing out on is debt, financial stress, and the locked-in trajectory that comes from spending everything you earn. And by the time you're 35, when the compound effects start becoming visible, you'll realize you weren't missing out. You were just playing a different game, one with better long-term payoffs. Let's talk about what these purchases cost you in terms of what you're not buying. If you're investing $300 monthly, that's $3,600 annually you're not spending on lifestyle upgrades. If you're buying a used car with cash instead of financing something newer, that's maybe $15,000 you're not spending on appearance. If you're investing in skills instead of entertainment, that's hundreds of hours you're not spending on immediate gratification. Add it all up, and you're sacrificing maybe $50,000 to $100,000 of lifestyle spending over your 20s. But that $50,000 to $100,000 invested and compounded over 30 years becomes $500,000 to $1 million. And more importantly, the skills, health, income streams, and assets you built become the foundation for earning multiples of what you would have earned otherwise. The trade-off isn't deprivation now versus wealth later. It's marginal lifestyle now versus exponentially better outcomes later. Most people don't make this trade because the sacrifice is concrete and the benefit is abstract. Saying no to a $40,000 car today is hard. The $400,000 you'd have at 50 by investing, the difference is just a number. But the person who understands compound effects, who can viscerally feel the future benefit of today's sacrifice, that person makes different choices. Boring choices. Choices that don't photograph well. And those choices compound into a life that looks nothing like the life of someone who optimized for appearing successful at 28. Your 20s will pass regardless of what you buy. The calendar moves forward, whether you're building leverage or burning income. The only question is what you'll have to show for it at 35. Will you have assets, skills, income streams, and options? Or will you have memories of looking successful while feeling stressed, debt that takes years to clear, and the realization that you have to start from scratch on building actual wealth? These 7 purchases aren't guarantees. They're probabilities. They increase your likelihood of financial independence, career flexibility, and long-term security. But they require believing in a version of yourself you haven't met yet. Your 40-year-old self, your 50-year-old self. The person who benefits from the decisions you make today, that person is waiting. And they're either going to thank you for the foundation you built, or they're going to wonder why you didn't start sooner. The choice is yours. But the window is closing.